Okay, welcome back. And the timing couldn't be more perfect to have back with us Joshua Philipp. He is an award-winning journalist and the senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times. He's the host of Crossroads, a news and analysis program there with Epoch TV. His work has been included the background investigation into the origin of COVID-19 and Wuhan laboratory there in the early days there in China, and especially during the early days of the pandemic. You can go to theepochtimes.com is the website. Excuse me, there's the picture of the landing page, theepochtimes.com. Joshua, good to see you again, friend. How are you?
Always a pleasure. And seems that things keep getting more interesting in the world every time we talk.
I shake my head. I don't know how you sleep at night, given your background. Just so much to take a look at. Let's do a few domestic things here first. Joe Kent, top counter terrorism official there in the agency, quit. He resigned and gave a bunch of reasons for it. Right in the middle of this conflict in Iran. What's your take on this one?
I have two different minds on it, and this is just based on, kind of reading what we've seen out there. One side of me says that, well, maybe there is some dissent within the Trump White House. Maybe not everybody agrees with his actions on Iran. I think his reasoning doesn't make sense to me, especially from somebody who would be involved in counterintelligence and would understand the Iranian threat. Basically, from what I get, he's saying that he's leaving because Iran did not pose a direct threat to the United States. That's not true. Intelligence, including given to Donald Trump during the 2024 elections, Trump was even briefed by the FBI on it, said that the Iranian regime was plotting to assassinate President Donald Trump during the election. This is not a rumor. This was mainstream news coverage. This was FBI briefings. This was public. The Iranian regime was threatening and plotting to kill the leading presidential candidate during one of our elections. Iranian agents have been arrested in New York City, in Washington, D.C. for plotting assassinations, working with transnational crime groups to do it on American soil. The threats of Hezbollah, especially in Latin America, and especially because of the open borders, are a huge problem. Anybody involved in counterintelligence would know all these threats. And of course, not to mention economic threats, involvement with China and Russia, and the entire, I think, broader picture of what's happening right now. To me, his statement does not line up. Even with basic knowledge on national security, his claims on why he left do not line up. From within the Trump administration, he's being accused of being a leaker, suggesting that maybe he fears prosecution, maybe he fears investigation. Again, I don't know if that's the case or not. But this is also in context of Tucker Carlson now coming out and claiming, we don't know whether this is true or not, but according to him, he claims that his communications with the Iranian regime prior to the U.S. attacks right now were being monitored by the CIA, suggesting that he could face foreign agent charges under FARA, under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. That would suggest, if that is true, that the U.S. government is looking into people who may have been leaking, may have been in communication with the enemies of the United States, and maybe this is related to Kent, maybe not. But again, these are kind of the factors I'm looking at.
Do you think it could just be simply an inter-office squabble with his boss?
It actually would have been better for him to come out and just say that, to be honest. That, I have internal disagreements, because the statement he made makes less sense than that, my take.
Gosh, it's horrible if he's possibly a mole.
Well, again, I don't know. I don't know if he's been leaking stuff to Iran, but there are accusations in the White House that he was leaking stuff to, like, the media. And this is a big issue too within the Pentagon. This was part of the conflict, in U.S. intelligence and defense. But this is part of the context of why the Pentagon, put additional requirements on journalists, made so they can't roam around the Pentagon building. A lot of the leaking that was taking place within U.S. military action was coming through that. Based on this, we can say without a doubt that the Trump administration is taking internal leaks a lot more seriously. Whether that's involved with this, maybe, but that is the accusation he's facing.
Amazing. 30,000-foot view. How do you think America's taken the war?
My view on the war with Iran is probably a lot different from what you're going to hear from most people, mainly because I don't see it as being isolated. In my eyes, this is interconnected with everything happening with Venezuela. This is everything interconnected with the new the Trump regional defense pact he made with many Latin American governments, going after cartel networks throughout Latin America. This is tied in with the upcoming talks with China, which are now delayed, by the way. This is tied in with Russia. This is tied in with the possible regime change in Cuba. Iran is part of a global kind of axis, and Iran and the conflict there cannot be viewed as being separate from this global axis. From my perspective, this ties into the war plans of the Chinese Communist Party, the preparations to invade Taiwan. In their own writings, they were saying that in order to invade Taiwan, they'd first need to get America involved in three other wars. They wanted a war with Russia, which they got. They wanted a war in Latin America, which was avoided after Trump took out Maduro in Venezuela, because Venezuela was actually preparing to invade Guyana literally within any minute when Trump captured Maduro. That would have happened within any minute when that took place. And Iran was the third piece. They wanted a terror war, and Iran is kind of the puppeteer of global terrorism, plotting attacks in Iraq, plotting attacks in Afghanistan, feeding the fires of Hezbollah and Hamas. Actually, operations all throughout Latin America, which have very likely infiltrated the United States. Assassination networks, ties in with cartels, narco terrorist organizations, and organized crime groups. And so, in my eyes, this is tied in with that. I think Trump has taking Venezuela off the table was a huge blow to this global agenda. I believe the CCP saw a very narrow time window, as did Iran and Russia. Taking Iran off the table basically eliminates the war plan if Trump can succeed in this. And the narrow window is formed by this. The sad reality is America lacks rare earth minerals, which we need to fight a war. We're dependent on China for that. We also lack wartime manufacturing. Trump's trying to rebuild that. The time frame on that's going to be 2 or 3 years. Also, we lack the domestic ability to produce the medications we need, including during wartime. We're also dependent on China for that. And so, if they can't start a war within the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be able to stand on our own 2 feet without them. And so they're seeing a very narrow window for this. They understand that based on current capabilities, they can't fight us full head on. They need to get us involved in at least three other wars in addition to them. And so I think Trump taking these off the table could eliminate that possibility.
Fascinating review. So, with Venezuela and Iran being knocked down, I mean, it seems like to me, to your point, China is kind of going, oops, that didn't work. But there's another side part of that, and that is oil. China is not getting their oil. So in some ways, their plan is backfiring, and he's using it to weaken them even more, maybe to bring them to the table.
This ties into a different form of war that America typically does not fight, but our adversaries do. You would call this gray zone warfare. You'd call it, in some cases, you call it total war. China, it's been referred to as unrestricted warfare, war without limits. And what does that mean? It means what would you want to achieve through the act of war? You're not viewing war as merely, tanks and bombs and counting bodies in the battlefield. You're viewing war as a totality of a battle between systems. That's economy, that's software, culture, it's media, it's public opinion warfare. It's even, for example, using cyber attacks to steal intellectual property to undermine a country on the international market. It's currency warfare, like China's attempts to create an alternate world reserve currency using the BRICS dollar. Things like this is the bigger picture of what warfare represents. And based on a very interesting analysis, which is this: if you were to invade a country, if we were to invade Iran or invade another country, or if Russia were to take over Ukraine tomorrow, what do they actually get out of it? Right? If you think about it from this perspective, what do they actually get out of it? If you fully conquer a country, well, you gain control of their politics, you gain control of their economy, their businesses, you gain control of the media, you gain control of the culture to an extent. And then you face a lot of domestic pushback based on public opinion, whether they support what you did or not. These are the complexities of conquering, the complexities of defeating an enemy. What do you do afterwards? The thinking of this totality of warfare concept, right? Whether it's war without limits or unrestricted warfare or gray zone warfare or what's called sometimes fifth generation warfare, is how do you achieve that exact same result and manage it better without the need of military intervention or military invasion? The simple answer is you take over the politics, you take over the businesses, you take over the influencers who inform public opinion. If you can achieve that, you take over the country without needing to fire a shot. You control their economy, you control their politics, and you control public opinion and culture. For the CCP, this is the main operation of what's called it's called the United Front Work Department, one of their large scale operations, even tied in with the political warfare departments of their own military, which they have, by the way.
Hmm.
It used to be called the General Political Department. They've since reorganized it. America does not fight this very well. We're very much still brute force, head on. We have too many laws of transparency to really allow us to fully fight this type of unconventional war. But what I think Trump has done is he's found a way to do it. He's found a way to do it, which is basically he does it and then is just incredibly straightforward about it. He does it and then posts videos of us doing it and makes fun of them. He does it and mocks them publicly on the internet. And a lot of people think this is kind of ham-fisted and not very well, not very dignified. But this does tie into a war that we're in, whether we like it or not. The war of public opinion, the war of political systems, and the war of economies.
Mm-hmm.
On the front of oil, it is true. If you can cut off the finances, if you can cut off the economic sectors, if you can cut off the money, you not only cripple the regime and what it can or can't do, most importantly, you impact basic quality of life for the citizens. If the citizens can't turn on the lights to their home, can't light the fires for their stove, can't find a job, what do? Well, they go to the streets and they protest. And when they protest and go on the streets, well, that's when you hit them with the information warfare element. You feed the fires of domestic resolve to overthrow the regime. I think Trump is doing this very heavily in Iran right now. I believe they're actually counting on the Iranian people to overthrow the regime. I believe that is the main plan: disable the leadership, cripple the economy, fuel the fires of domestic, grounds up unrest,
Mm-hmm.
and through that create regime change. Same thing it did in Latin America with Venezuela. Same thing I think they're doing with China right now, actually, to an extent, maybe not to that extent, like overthrowing the regime, but without a doubt, using public pressure through economic pressure in order to create instability to force them to make a deal. Very likely,
Yeah.
what I think is going to happen,
Yeah.
Trump's going to do an oil deal in exchange for rare earth minerals, that's how I see this unfolding.
Fascinating. One quick question. I got to take a break. Is it possible that the president's outsmarted the other guy?
Trump's an interesting character. It's not clear sometimes whether he thinks about things too deeply or if he just acts on instinct, and it tends to work very well. Based on my reading of Donald Trump, the way he works is he likes to have guys in charge of different parts of his government who are trustworthy and very well informed, and he tends to trust them. I think the guys around Trump know what they're doing. Again, I know many of them personally because, over the past 4 years into the Biden administration, a lot of the guys Trump chose were the most outspoken against what was happening for the last 4 or 5 years. Because of that, I know they're pretty good guys, and I know they know what they're talking about. So I think Trump has around him very smart people, and they're informing him in very accurate ways of how to do these things.
Fascinating. All right, let me take a quick break. Check out Joshua's website, theepochtimes.com. Well known. There's a picture of the landing page, and check out his crossroads there on the Epoch TV. And I think you'll find it fascinating. Such an honor to have him today. We're going to switch gears here with some other articles that he's written. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Always an honor when we have time to sit down with Joshua Philipp. He's an award-winning journalist and the senior investigative reporter for Epoch Times. Check out his own show called Crossroads, which is there on Epoch TV. And, of course, the website, theepochtimes.com. theDove.com, and there's a picture of the landing page. Oh, Joshua, so much time to talk to you about. You know, I probably at times read more FCC documents than I do the Bible, and that's not a good thing. But I do watch this stuff because I have to. And the new chairman is quite concerned as to whether or not we're covering the war correctly. You wrote an article on this. What's your take?
Well, it's going to be interesting. Basically, many mainstream news outlets, their broadcast licenses are up for renewal. And the FCC chairman is actually coming out and saying, Brendan Carr is saying that they may not renew the broadcast licenses for several news outlets. One of the triggers for this was there was an alleged, I believe it was fake. The Trump administration says it was fake. A fake video going around published by, I believe, Russian disinformation services, but pushed by Iran, alleging they had blown up a U.S. warship. Now, typically with the United States, if we lose a warship, it's pretty dang public. You'd hear it. You'd hear it, of course. But this was a fake video. It was an AI generated video. And what happened after that, many news outlets also broadcasted this. A lot of the mainstream media picked up this fake video and they broadcasted it. And the Trump administration was saying effectively they knowingly published false information. And based on the knowingly publishing false information during a time when we're kind of at war, I know it's not called a war, but effectively disabling the military of an entire country. That's if we don't call that war, what do we call it? During a time when American troops are, morale is an issue, during a time when our war fighting capabilities are tied into it, during a time when domestic support and congressional support is a very big deal, using disinformation, falsified videos, publishing it knowingly in a way that would have a political impact, which it seems to be this is the motivation for the mainstream media. Deeply partisan, deeply politically motivated, not acting in the interest of the American people or public or the public good, which is part of their requirement, but instead acting on their own volitions, acting out of hatred for the president, their own dislike of him, personal issues, letting that skew whether or not they're even telling the truth to the American people. And for the Trump administration, this ties into something even deeper than just public opinion and wartime national security and things like that. This ties into a broader pattern they're watching, where the mainstream news has repeatedly peddled false information, whether it was the fake Trump Russia hoax, which turned out to be opposition research funded by the Clinton campaign and the Democrat Party. Whether it was, for example, the cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop issue, whether it be a lot of the false information coming out and just, scandal after scandal after scandal. It seems that the mainstream media, many of these journalists are knowingly publishing false information with the intent of having a partisan political impact, meaning they're misusing the legal requirements of their broadcast licenses are being misused by them for personal interest or political interest. And so Trump is suggesting, or at least the FCC is suggesting, that they may actually revoke the licenses of these companies, which would be a very big deal.
There's a little bit of a precedent out there. The president's company has sued CBS and won. Or, well, at least they settled, which is an admission. MSN now has admitted. CBS has done retractions. NBC has done retractions. And I purposely watched CNN the other day just to see what's going on. Not only have they made retractions, but I watched them for an hour yesterday just to see if I'm missing something. Every story. The only thing that was exempted were the advertisements where they bashed Trump. So I guess all of these outfits have broadcast licenses at one degree or another, whether they own a station, and that's primarily where it comes into, would be owner station operated like we are here. This would be a major precedent if the FCC pulls their license. I would imagine it's going to be tied up in the courts, but he'd have to come up with a pretty strong argument to do this.
I think what would likely happen is the FCC could not pull the licenses, but not renew the licenses, which is an interesting way to do it. And Well, I mean, it very likely would be challenged in court.
Well,
I'd be
at that
shocked
point,
if it wasn't.
yeah, if I understand that, all right, so if they don't pull it, but they don't renew it, you're in kind of like in a suspended category, which really opens them up for fines.
It does.
Yeah,
But there is precedence to this, which is during the Biden administration, recent history. Real America's Voice, OAN, a lot of Newsmax, Epoch Times, a lot of media were actually deeply censored during the Biden administration.
right.
Many of the conservative or conservative leaning
Yeah.
TV channels were
Mhm.
actually threatened to be, taken off the air. There were congressional hearings on this. There was political pressure on it. There was efforts of the Biden administration creating different bodies that were pressuring social media, pressuring advertisers.
Right.
Um, you could argue whether this would constitute government censorship, but Mark Zuckerberg came out and said that he believed that he was under threat effectively if he did not censor many conservative voices. Under threat from the Biden administration,
Right.
under threat from the government at the time. And so the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress during the Biden administration did take actions to censor, deplatform, and demonetize conservative news outlets. And a lot of that was based on what turns out to be conservative news outlets publishing
Yeah.
what we now know to be
Right.
accurate information. Information on the vaccines and efficacy of the vaccines,
Right.
information on COVID-19, the origin of the virus, information on different political squabbles that turned out that Republicans were right on many of those. As the smoke cleared, and it turns out that the arms arguing, disinformation, the people making those arguments were the ones lying, and the people being accused were the ones who were innocent. And so there is precedence right now. Will Trump use that? Maybe. Without a doubt, there will be legal challenges, though.
Well, I understand the FCC has more power now. The other ones that aren't regulated, like social media, we were the first broadcast network to get booted off of YouTube, and they took 15,000 of our videos, and only because their policy allows them to do it, and they were supposedly the arbiters of truth.
Same thing happened to me. My show Crossroads was demonetized.
Yeah, right.
I actually recently started a new one, the Josh Philipp show, to get around that because it was so ridiculous.
Yeah. This is interesting to watch. We're almost out of time. I do want to come back and talk to you about your work on following up on all this fraud that's out there. Of course, we got Governor Walz's state. Now we're down into California at levels that make his problems look small. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. This is amazing. Let me say to our viewers and listeners a couple of things here. Check out the show called Crossroads, which is there on Epoch TV. Of course, you can check out his articles, theepochtimes.com. You can check that out. You see them all over the place, and yet you give us time when we call, Joshua, and I really, really value that greatly. This is fascinating. We'll see over the next couple of weeks how the war turns out. And if your big scenario, the big picture with China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and now Cuba's in the mix, all kind of works its way to the surface. Thank you, friend. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.